Hi everyone, Mike here from Comp3 Interactive. Welcome back to the channel. Today we've actually got a video that's been requested many times to me. And that is how to create your own custom editor or inspector. Now today we're going to be focusing on a utility editor script. And initially I was having a little bit of trouble thinking of an idea to actually demonstrate this. Because custom editors are they're not a one-stop shop. You create these to help you develop your own game. So there's not many that can be really universally used. So the one that I've decided to show is relatively simple, but I think it shows quite a lot of the core fundamentals of designing an editor window. And the one that we're going to create is this question generator for a quiz game. So if we take a look at this, we see we have a field for a question, 4 answer fields, 4 toggles for whether or not that answer is the correct answer, and then a generate question. We also have error trapping in here as well, so if we try and generate an empty question, we get some log warnings. And if we go through and select a correct answer, generate the question, what the... I managed to delete one of my folders. Anyway, if we enter all of our stuff and select a correct answer and click generate, we see questions, the folder that I'd managed to delete, has a question in there now. Pretty simple stuff, but it saves you a lot of time over generating questions the old-fashioned way, entering a 4, and then you see what I'm getting at. Right, so first of all, let's get rid of all of this. I'll give you a brief walkthrough of my question and answer scripts, and then we'll get into generating the editor. But first, I'd just like to thank Gigatank3000 for sponsoring this video. I've got the links down in the description. Make sure you go and follow them on Twitter and check out the website for more information and updates about their games. Okay, so we'll just do a quick run through to show you my existing scripts. Now my question script is just your bog standard scriptable object. So we've got a create asset menu, we inherit from scriptable object, and we have 2 fields. We have one for the question itself and a list of answers for the possible answers. So answer is just as simple. We have 2 fields, the answer itself, and a boolean for whether or not that answer is correct. We also have a constructor. A constructor fires whenever this object is created. So what we're doing, when we create a new answer, we'll pass in the answer and whether or not it's correct, and these will be automatically populated. If you want a video about constructors, I can certainly do that for you. Just let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can do. Okay, so we'll just go back to Unity now, and we'll get started with our script. The first thing we want to do is create a new folder, and we're going to call that editor with a capital E, and it has to be called editor. The reason being, editor is a reserved Unity folder, and anything inside it won't actually be compiled when you build your game. So for things like this, where it is just an editor script and it has no bearing on the actual game, put it inside your editor script. 1, it'll take down your build size, and 2, certain things that you do for the editor require the editor to be in existence, so you may get some build errors if you don't put it in this folder. So now that we've got that, we can go ahead and create a C# script that we'll call question generator. Call that whatever you want. And we'll open that up in Visual Studio. Now we definitely do not need our start and update methods in this. We won't be needing system.collections, but we will be needing using Unity editor for obvious reasons. And the final little bit of setup we need to do is we don't want to inherit from mono behavior anymore, we want to inherit from editor window. Again, if you want more information on inheritance, I do have a video on my channel already about that, where I go into a lot more detail. So let's take a think about what we actually want, and we'll generate our methods based on that. Well, first of all, we're obviously going to want a way to display this window in the editor. So that'll be a public static void, and we'll call this show window. And this needs an attribute. This needs a menu item attribute. so it will actually appear in the toolbar at the top of our editor. So that'll just be menu item, and we can call this whatever we like, but we need to make sure we give it a parent folder as well as its actual name. So I'm going to put this in the parent folder utils, and I'm just going to call this question generator. And just to show you what that's doing, when it compiles, we'll see up here in the toolbar, we get a utils folder, which now has the question generator window in there. Now currently clicking that won't do anything because we haven't told it to do anything. But we'll just leave that for a second. Next, we want our method to actually show a design for our window. And again, this is going to be a reserved method name. This is going to be private void on GUI. So all of our design and our logic is going to need to go inside of on GUI. So now we'll just create a shell for our functional methods. So we're going to want to be able to check if what the user has entered is actually valid content. So we'll create a private bool is valid content, and for now we'll just return true so we get rid of that error. So we're going to call this whenever we want to generate our scriptable object, just to double check that everything is in order and it's valid content. Next, we're going to need a way to actually generate the question itself. So that's going to be a private void generate question. And inside there is where we're going to create the scriptable object. And then finally, one more, private void reset form. And inside there, we're just going to reset all the UI so it's ready to accept another question. So let's scroll to the top and we'll start going from top to bottom with these methods. So just like any other script, we're going to need a few variables. The variables that we're going to need are a question path, so that's going to be the path that we want to save this scriptable object to when it's been generated. We're also going to want a local reference to the question that's been entered on the window, references for all the answers, and all the booleans for whether or not that answer is correct. So we'll just add these in. So those are going to be private string, we'll call this question path, and we can set that equal to assets, assets folder in our project, questions, which is the folder that I managed to delete before, and we'll just call each question question. Now later on we'll actually find a way to give question a unique name for each one, but we'll come to that when we come to that. So we also need a private string for our question. We need a private string array for our answers, and we'll set that equal to a new string array, and we're going to want 4 questions, and we're going to want exactly the same for our booleans. Is correct equals new bool array, and 4 of those as well. So that's all the variables that we're going to need for this entire script. Next up, show window method. Now this is what's going to be fired whenever we click our utils question generator button. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to get an instance of this window. So we'll just create an editor window, call that window, and we'll set that equal to get window of type question generator, and we'll give it the name question generator. What a surprise. So all that's doing is creating a new instance of our window and popping it out in the editor. Another thing we can also do, we can use this window reference and we can set a min size, so the minimum size that this window needs to be, and that needs to be a vector 2, so that's a new vector 2, and based on my testing prior to recording this, my minimum size is going to be 400 wide by 200 pixels tall. Next we get into the good stuff, so we can start designing our window now. So first of all we want a header, and our header will just be a bog standard label. So to get a label in your window, that is under editor GUI layout dot label field. Now label field is going to take in 2 parameters. It's going to take in what we want the label to be, which will be question generator, and it can also take in a style as well. And because this is the header and it's going to be what's describing what this window is, we want this in bold. So we can add in the style using editor styles bold label. And I won't do this every time we add something, but I'll just show you that we're now in the process of creating our window. If we click on a question generator button, we get a new window with question generator written in, and this is the title that we gave the window itself. And this can be dragged around like any other window, and automatically you can dock this wherever you like. Simple. Right, so we'll get on with building all this, and the next time you see the window, it should be a fully functional window. Okay, so let's start with another editor GUI layout function. And that's going to be space, and as you'd imagine, all that's going to do is add a little bit of padding, a little bit of spacing in between our label field and whatever we put underneath it, rather. So that'll be editor GUI layout dot space. Simple as that. You can also add in the amount of pixels of space you want in there. I'm just going to leave it to the default, which I think is 10, if I'm not mistaken. Next, we're going to want to define the vertical area of our window for the contents of our window. So this is sort of like a wrapper around everything that's going to be inside. And again, that is editor GUI layout dot begin vertical. And just so we don't forget to do it, we can copy that, and we need to make sure that we end that vertical at the bottom of our window as well. So everything else needs to go in between our begin and end vertical layouts. So next up, we can add in a text field, which is going to be the text input for our question. So the way that we need to do this, we need to set a question variable, a string up at the top. So that'll be question is equal to editor GUI layout dot text field. Now in this we need to pass in the label for the text field and also the reference to the text field itself. So this is going to be question followed by the question variable itself again. So now this will display an input field with the label question, and every time we update it, our script's question string will be updated with whatever's inside there. Next, we want to render all 4 of our answer fields, and we can do this really quickly using a for loop. And we know we have 4 answers, so we'll go over this 4 times. Now each one of these we want to add a little bit of design to, so we're going to add a box border. And we also want answer input text and is correct boolean to be on the same row. So the way that we need to do that is similarly how we're doing begin vertical up here. We want to set a horizontal sort of grid. We can do editor GUI layout dot begin horizontal, and again we want to make sure that we end that horizontal after we've finished. And we can give the begin horizontal a styling, but this time we just need to pass a string in. And that string is going to be box with a capital B. So that'll highlight this entire area with just like a darker shade of grey. Again, that's completely optional, it's just a styling option. So now, similarly to how we did our question field, we need to set answers I, using our index for our for loop, equal to editor GUI layout.text field. We're going to give it the label answer, and we'll pass in our index +1, because as we all know, indexes start at 0, but on screen we actually want this to say answer 1, 2, 3 and 4. And we'll just finish that with a colon as well. And then the actual reference itself, again, is going to be answers and the index that we're currently working on. Next we need our is correct boolean. So we'll again use our index on is correct, and this time we need editor GUI layout dot toggle. So a toggle is just your bog standard checkbox, and we don't want to give this a label, so we'll just put nothing in there. And again, is correct, we'll pass the reference in. So this should now render 4 individual answer boxes, all referencing an individual answer and is correct local reference. And the final thing that we want inside of our design is the generate button. So right at the end, you've populated everything, you click the button, everything's good as gold. Now buttons, to me anyway, seem a little bit strange because they need to be inside an if statement. So we need to do if GUI layout this time, dot button, and then we'll give the button its string name. So we'll just call that generate question. So what this is going to do, this is going to render the button on screen, and anything inside your if statement will be fired if you press the button. So inside here for now, we want to make sure that we validate our data and generate our question. So we'll just have a look how this is looking now. So if we pop back over and load up our window, we can see we have our question, our answers, and our booleans. But we can see that there's too big of a space here. There's no reason for this to be so short. So we'll just do a little bit of design tweaking. So first of all, we'll focus on our question label. So we can set this label width to whatever we like. And to do that, we'll use editor GUI utility dot label width. And we'll set our label width to 75 pixels. And that will carry on until we set it somewhere else. So if we were to copy and paste this line and put it under here to 100, any labels after that would be 100 pixels wide. So now that we know that, we can actually set a field width for our answers. So just below that and just above where we start our for loop, we can do another editor GUI utility dot field width this time, and we'll set this equal to a Windows width minus a specific value. So to get your current Windows width, that is just simply position.width, and then we can take away a value just to give it that bit of padding on the right hand side. So I'm going to minus 150 from that, and that 150 will be where our toggles are in place. So if we just quickly pop back to Unity and reload our question generator, we can see everything's looking a lot nicer now, and we can extend this, and we see that we have a minimum width and we have a minimum height as well. So everything's looking really good now. Next up, we want to make sure that we validate everything that the user yourself has put in those fields, so we don't accidentally have an empty question or an empty answer, and we also want to make sure that we've got exactly one correct answer selected. So I'm just going to fly through this. You can add whatever validation you need in here for your editor. For me, like I say, I'm going to make sure that all 4 answers are populated, the question's populated, only one answer is marked as correct. If any of these fail, I'm going to return false from this method, and I'm going to put out a debug.log warning, or else if everything passes, I'm just going to let it return true. So I'll speed this bit up, but then I'll just give you a quick overview of what each of these functions are doing. Okay, so there we have it. I'm just going to give you a quick walkthrough of what all this validation is. So we're going to check a question field. If it's null or white spaces, we'll put out the warning, you must enter a question, and we'll return false. Next up, we're going to check all strings in our answers, so this will go over it 4 times. If one of our answers is null or white space, we're going to pop out, you must enter all 4 questions, and then return false. Next, a little bit differently, we're going to check our booleans. So we're going to create a counter, and we're going to initialize that to 0. And then we're going to loop over every one of our booleans. Now, if it's true, we'll increment our counter by 1, and then we'll check, after we've gone through all 4 of them, if our counter isn't exactly 1, then we'll put out a warning saying you must mark exactly 1 answer as correct and return false. But if we have a question, we have all 4 answers populated, we have 1 answer selected as correct, everything will return as true. So we'll pass our validation. So now we can add this into our button press. We just take these comments out. We can check if is valid content. And if we do have valid content, we want to generate our scriptable object. So we'll call generate question inside there. So let's move on to generate question. Now in here we're going to need to create an instance of our scriptable object of type question. Now if you've watched my CSV to scriptable object tutorial, some of this may look familiar. So first of all we're going to create a new question. So that's going to be question, we'll call that Q, and we'll set that equal to create instance of type question. So now we have a new scriptable object of type question to play with. So we'll set Q's question equal to a local reference of question. Next we're going to want to initialize our answers list. So that'll be Q dot answers equals a new list of type answer. Simple stuff, we've all done this before. Next we want to loop over every one of our answers and add it to that list. So we'll do another for loop. And we'll loop over 4 times because we know we've got 4 questions. We can do q.answers.add. And then this is where we're going to use the constructor that we talked about earlier. So we can create a new answer. And we're going to get an error for that because our constructor is expecting 2 parameters, a string and a boolean for the answer and whether or not it's correct. So we can just pass in our local answer and use our index and then comma is correct, our local reference for is correct. Sorry, that's answers. And we'll do that 4 times. So now that we've completely populated that scriptable object, we want to save it. So first of all, we're going to want to create a unique name for that asset. So we'll create a string, we'll call it file name. We'll set that equal to, now Unity already has a method for doing this, luckily enough, and that's under asset database dot generate unique asset path. And then we need to pass this in a string, which is going to be our question path. So what that's going to do, that's going to take our question path, which is assets, questions, question.asset, and when we save it, the first one is going to be called question, the second one will be called question 1, then question 2, then question 3, and so on. And now again we need to access our asset database. We'll create a new asset with create asset. We'll pass in a question, which is Q, and then we'll also pass in the file name that we've just generated. Next we want to make sure that we save that asset, so that's asset database save assets, and once everything's finished we want to reset that form, so we'll just call reset form. So inside here we just want to make sure that we set a local question equal to null. We'll do another for loop and we'll do this again 4 times, and that's just going to set answers I equal to null and also is correct, and we'll set that to false. And just as the final touch, when we reset the form, we want to set the focus inside of our window automatically back to question. So how do we do that? Well, we've got our reference up here to our question field, so we can give it a local name reference called a control name. To do that, above the input field, we can add in GUI.set next control name, and we'll give it the name question. So now our question field has a reference that we can get a hold of. So if we come back to our reset form, after we've done all of our resetting, we can call GUI.focusControl and we'll pass in question. So now that's going to find our question reference, which is going to be our question input box, and set our focus automatically to that. So the moment of truth now, let's see this in action. So we can open up our utils window. Again, we can move it around or we can dock it wherever we like. So let's add in a basic question, and keep your eye down here on the questions folder as well. So we can do what is my name? John, Tim, Mike, Bill. And we can check our error validation here as well. See, I don't have any of the answers selected as correct. So if I generate question, we get a warning message. You must mark exactly one answer as correct. We'll mark Mike as correct, generate the question. We see now we've reset our form. We've got focus on the question. And down here in our questions folder, we have a scriptable object question populated exactly how we want it. Perfect. And we can do this for as many questions as we like. Who sings Enter Sandman? Lamb of God. Amon Amarth. Metallica. Backstreet Boys. And we'll select the correct answer, which is Metallica. Generate that question. We see we now have question 1. We get a unique name, and we have all of our answers and which one is correct. And that is about it. You can build on this however you like. You can tailor it for your game. It just makes adding in these little things a lot quicker and a lot smoother. So I hope you've learned something today. So with that, I'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more bite-sized Unity hints and tips.